Tuesday, February the 12th. Lake level is about 913 and a half. It hadn't changed much since last week. And the water temperature is pretty cold. I hadn't been out. I got out for a few hours today. It's the first time in about a week and a half. Weather finally broke enough to where I could get my boat out of the driveway, and the snow and ice melted from the ramps. There hadn't been too many people out fishing that I know of. The lake's in pretty good shape. Some of the backs of the creeks are froze, and the James River is froze up to about Piney Creek. There's ice all the way across the lake, but a lot of that should thaw out tomorrow. But as far as the ramps and everything, everything's melted down to pavement that I seen today. And like I said, for the most part, you can get around the lake. It's just in the some of the shallow areas have got a thin layer of ice, but it won't take too much for that to melt. But talking to guys up at Lake of the Ozarks, and that whole lake is froze. Several places got several inches, and I believe Stockton's the same way. It's been an extremely cold winter. But I had a pretty tough day. Went out for a few hours today, and I mainly threw a jerkbait in an Alabama rig. I've seen a lot of dead shad, real little guys kind of spinning off. I didn't have my float and fly with me today. A buddy of mine that was out, I talked to him several times today. He was in the same area as I was, and he caught a few on a float and fly, so I may try that out a little bit tomorrow. But I've got several trips coming up to next week, so my wife told me I need to get my butt back out there and find some fish, so I'm going to do exactly what my wife tells me. I'm going to go fishing again. So hopefully next week, I'll have some detailed information about how I'm catching them. Like I say, there hadn't been too much fishing action going on because the weather's been so cold, and all the ramps and everything have been froze where you couldn't even get your boat launched. But it looks like we've got a good warming trend, and I think that's what it's going to take to, we get 3-4 days of consistent weather, and we should be able to start, to establish some kind of a pattern on these fish. But I got to get a bite or two first before I can start developing a pattern. The fishing's been good. The catching hadn't been real good for me. But like I say, I'll get out tomorrow and the next day and see if I can't get some things figured out. But last week we talked a little bit about a drop shot, about how to rig it up. And I told you this week I was going to do some stuff on a Carolina rig and a split shot. And also we've got a new GoPro camera. So as soon as we get all the software and stuff figured out on that, we're going to try to do some live shots with the fish finders and some different shots out on the lake. So it may take us a little bit to get that figured out. But most of the time on a Carolina rig, there's two different ways that I rig it up. Depending on how deep I'm fishing, I'll usually use an egg weight and a bead, then a swivel, then about a 24 to 30 inch leader. Now you can get plastic beads, but I found if you use a glass bead, and especially if you use tungsten weight, every time that weight bounces up against that bead, it makes a clack like a rattle. So I don't think that hurts anything. Mainly the only reason the bead is in there is to help protect the knot on the swivel, so with this big weight slamming up and down on it. And as far as the size of the hook that I'm going to use, just depends on what type of plastic I'm throwing with it. This is a EWG hook, and this is what I would use if I was throwing like a 4-inch twin-tail chompers. There'd be a good hook on it, or even a tube. The good thing about a Carolina rig or split shot, you can fish literally any kind of plastic bait that you want. You just want to change your hook size to adapt to the plastic. Now, another way I rig the Carolina rig up, and that one there is on a swivel, and what I use probably 80-90% of the time is this little deal right here that's called a Carolina keeper. And what it does, instead of having to tie the swivel on there, let's see if I got one here. This Carolina keeper is just a little barrel piece of plastic. Basically what you do is you take and squeeze it with the needle nose, and the line goes right in the middle of it. So if I got to retie or something, all I got to do is squeeze it, slide it up the line, and I can retie. Now what's good about the swivel setup, like on this one here, if you like to use braided line, So you can just run your main line braid, then you can tie a monofilament and a fluorocarbon leader. A lot of times what I'll do is if I'm fishing a rig like this, I may have 15-pound main line, and then on my leader I'll use 8 or 10, depending on what size bait I'm using and what type of cover I'm fishing. But by putting the lighter line on the leader, I think it lets the bait float up a little bit better. And also, if you get hung up in the brush and stuff, if you get stuck and break off, you'll break off on your leader. You won't lose your weight and your swivel, so you just got, one knot to tie here and then you hook on. And the same thing on a spinning rod. Now, if I was downsizing a Carolina rig on the spinning rod, I might use 8 or 10. Oh, let me get on the rod too. On a Carolina rig with the bait caster, I usually like to throw a 7-foot rod, and not a heavy, not a real stiff. I like something like a medium heavy, almost like what I would flip a jig in boat docks with. Anything from a 6/8 to depending if you're a taller person. A lot of guys will Carolina rig with a long rod, with a 7.5-foot rod, but I'm real comfortable with a 7, and I like a medium heavy action. Now on the spinning rod, I like about a 6/8 to a 7-foot, maybe 7.2, and medium heavy on that as well. And I will rig up the miniature Carolina rig the same way. I'll either use a swivel and an egg weight, but I'll use like a 3/8 ounce weight. I'll use a smaller weight, and I may use 8 or 10 pound main line. But here again, if you like to use braid, you can use braid or nanofill on the main line, then tie your fluorocarbon or mono leader on after it. And a lot of times we'll downsize from the Carolina rig when the bite's a little bit more subtle. It seems like you get more bites if you rig up like a finesse Carolina rig on the spinning rod with 8-pound line, 1/4 ounce or 3/8 ounce weight. It makes you fish it a little bit slower with the lighter weight and keep it on bottom. So I think that's one thing that kind of helps you. With the bigger weight, sometimes I think we tend to fish them too fast. And one of the main things we throw is a split shot on the spinning rod, especially in the springtime when these fish are anywhere from 20 foot or shallower. And what I usually do is take a number 3 split shot and I crimp it right onto the line. Now, for years we used to use, and some of you have probably used this, called a Mojo setup. It was a cylinder weight. You had to feed it through the line, then you put a little rubber keeper in there. Well, that's kind of a pain to tie and to rig up every time you break it off. A lot of people, will get concerned about crimping the lead onto the line, but I've been fishing a split shot for probably 15 to 20 years, and when I do hang up and break it off, a lot of times I'll come back with the split shot, it'll break off between the split shot and the hook. So that gives me the confidence that I'm not weakening my line, by crimping this on. A lot of times when you get it stuck and you do get it back, you got to slide your split shot up and re-crimp it, and I don't find that it puts burrs on the line. Now this is a real light finesse deal. Usually we're throwing a little 4-inch finesse worm. I've got a centipede on there right now. But what's really, on this particular rig too, I will use a little bit softer spinning rod. I'll almost use just a straight medium action, and sometimes maybe even a medium light. Still the same length, anywhere from a 6.5 to like a 7 or 7.2. But normally on the split shot we're throwing 6-pound line. So I like a lighter rod, so it's a little bit more forgiving. In the event that you catch a big fish, you're less apt to break them off. But split shots, a really good finesse tactic in the springtime. It'll work throughout the year, but as the fish get deeper, it's a little bit harder to fish out in the deeper water and stay in contact with the bottom. That's when I'll step it up to like the finesse Carolina rig, put a little bit heavier weight, and still use a spinning rod. So I hope that's helped you out a little bit as far as how I rig the Carolina rig and the split shot rig. So next week, I'll get some time out on the water in the next week or so, and hopefully we'll have some good fish catching to report and how I caught them. So till next week, good luck, good fishing.